Hello, and welcome back to This Week I Tried, or TWIT for short. The premise is simple: I play a game and make a quick, and more importantly, independent video review. This week I tried anime Dark Souls, Code Vein, which was made and published by Bandai Namco, which means everything they stole from Dark Souls, such as the ladder sounds, but done so legally. The general premise of the game is quite simple. The world ended when monsters and weird spiky tentacles came out the ground. To tackle this, evil scientists create revenants, which are essentially vampires. Unsurprisingly, you are one of these vampires sometime after the apocalypse happened. The issue at the end of the world is that people die, mainly humans. When you have a bunch of immortal blood-sucking creatures with no humans to feed off, there ends up being a blood shortage. So much so that you start your story as a slave hunting a rare resource called blood beads, which are the equivalent of Capri Suns but for blood. You then meet up with a mysterious stranger who takes you on a journey through the land to find the source of these blood beads, which, did I mention, grow on trees? That's about all I can really go into without spoiling the story, so we're going to move on to aesthetics, which I normally don't do first, but it ties into the premise. The world is incredibly bleak. You spend most of the story in a destroyed city, and you know the world has ended. There's the odd talk of government shelters and pockets of civilization, but you never actually go there. And if you do, it's because it's fallen. The best area is the dried up trenches, which no is not a euphemism. Instead, it's quite literally the bottom of a lake or ocean or something, a clear sign that the world is dead. For better or worse, the world also has its fair share of over the top, such as a pure white, eye-burning cathedral of sacred blood, which is quite possibly the worst map I have ever traversed in my life. This is the biggest issue the game has. It has created an incredibly bleak world, which is then thrown aside by oddly sexualized bosses, companions, and enemies. Admittedly, I don't normally care, but after fighting your third well-endowed giant lady, you get a bit put off. However, to save the game design comes the soundtrack. Now, admittedly, there are only a few good tracks, one of which is the main menu theme. But there were a lot of moments where the music, when used correctly, such as in the memories and post-boss fight debriefs, that tore at the heartstrings. Also, while I was mean about some enemies, most of them are generally pretty cool. Repetitive, especially in the first half of the game, but all have a certain terror to them. And yes, that does include the giant sword ladies. I will have nightmares about the lady knights in that blinding cathedral and the pain they caused me for the rest of my gaming life. And on the topic of pain, let's move on to mechanics. Now, this is a Dark Souls game, but more than most, they have made this genre their own with Code Vein. Now, it has a lot of the basic Souls-like features, such as collecting souls, or haze as it's called in this game, limited healing that you can restore at bonfires, or thistles in this game, but not all thistles. It's confusing, which is a recurring theme regarding this game's mechanics. It's a Souls-like, and if you don't know what that means, this game probably isn't for you anyway. However, the game has plenty of unique characteristics, my favourite of which is the class system. There are 20 classes that can roughly be split into 4 categories: magic, range, DPS and tank. More importantly is that you do not make these classes. They are all done for you. You can change class almost anywhere, and your stats will change to fit that class. For example, the fighter invests in strength and dexterity, and the caster favours mind and willpower. I actually love this system, although it has taken away a key aspect of most role-playing games, that of levelling up. Levelling up in this game is more paying to be stronger than anything else. Also, the acquisition of skills and classes normally involves delving deeper into the story through memory diving and talking to companions, which I can see being really annoying considering how slow you walk in most memories. Which brings us neatly onto the other difference, that of the companion system. There are 7, well I guess 8 if you include DLC, characters you can choose from, but you can only have one active at a time. Most of the time the reason why you want your companion is to take pressure off you, but they are still pretty strong, and I'm sure you could min-max so they cover your weaknesses. However, I just picked Louis and then Io and left it at that. They do add a lot to the game, they make it feel more dynamic. This game tends to throw a lot of enemies at you at once, and it's pretty cool seeing your companion fight alongside you. On the other hand, and I don't know whether this is because I rely on them too much or the way the game is designed, I often feel the game is significantly harder if not impossible without the companions. Especially in regards to bosses, where more often than not you will win depending on how well your companion performs. Most of my rages at this game came when my companion did not heal me, or when a boss focused me so much I couldn't move, while my companion instead focused on keeping up with my panicked dodges, then taking the opportunity to attack. However, with all its flaws, I still love the companion system. It's fun and adds to the world, and the increase in difficulty when fighting without a companion more than justifies keeping them even when they consistently fail you. Now moving on to actual combat, let's start with what is arguably the most important feature of any Souls-like, the ability to avoid damage. Now there are three main ways of avoiding damage. Dodging, which having played a lot of Dark Souls and Bloodborne is the main way of avoiding damage in my opinion. Then there's blocking, which every class can do but is essentially pointless for most, which is an issue because presumably blocking is how you are meant to deal with the undodgeable attacks by bosses, but the chip damage is so bad for most classes you might as well just try and dodge and hope for the best. Then there's the parry, which in this game has a fancy name. I believe it's Drain Attack, because they give you this game's equivalent of mana, but they are, for all intents and purposes, parries. Unfortunately, they are so pernickety that I can't in good faith call them a feasible way of avoiding damage, especially considering they randomly change depending on your armour. Thankfully, for any gift/magic users, you can do a dedicated Drain Attack, and for relatively easy mana gain, just do a backstab. If you are careful, you could actually build up enough mana before a boss fight just by backstabbing everyone that you should not run out as long as you do a token amount of normal attacks. Builds in this game derive from gift combinations or magic combinations. Each class and certain items in the world give gifts. A few are class specific, but most can be unlocked to be used with any class. Build making comes from the mixing and matching of these gifts. This is where the player can be inventive, and with the game's flexibility with when you can change classes, you don't have to worry about ruining a run by being inventive. The only limitation is your gear, as certain classes don't fulfill the stat requirements for certain armors and weapons, so perhaps wait before upgrading or getting rid of them before you decide on a class. And if you are wondering what build I am using in the footage on screen, which I doubt you've been watching, it's the Queen's Gambit build that can be found on the Fextra Life website. It's a high DPS suicide build essentially, very fun and transformed my late game damage immensely. I guess I should add that the game crashed once in the final area for me, but other than that was relatively stable. The only other issue was the noticeable frame rate drops in the transition areas between zones, normally these caves with lots of those doom tendrils I mentioned at the beginning. I also did some online play with the wonderful Steve, and beyond the very little healing you get as a support player, it was pretty good. You could explore a whole area with ease, and the password system means you can join friends much easier than most reviews seem to suggest you can. And with that, I have said all I feel I can say on this game, and thus we can move on to the totally legitimate numerical score, to which I give this game a resounding 5 Dark Souls games out of 6 waifus. This game is easily my second favourite Souls-like after Bloodborne. It's generally speaking a very good game, and while in comparison to Dark Souls it has more than its fair share of issues, that's a fair price to pay for a genuinely unique take on the genre. The companion system, although heavily flawed, adds so much to the game I cannot give it enough credit. And the class system is innovative and flexible enough that you do not have to start a whole new game to try out builds. I love this game. It was a pleasure to stream and great fun to play. And thus the TWIT is over. Thank you very much for watching, and if you want more video reviews, be sure to subscribe and check out the other videos on the channel. Also be sure to check out my Twitch channel on screen now. All the games I review are played live there first, and then there is my Twitter where I post updates, share memes, and mainly just exist. And with that self-shilling out the way, and for those who have stayed this far, I bid you a hearty cheerio and wish you a good week ahead.